Worldwide movement, peace, love, respect. Big King Sadiq hollering at you one more time. All right, folks. This particular video, we're going to title Patience, right? And this is a subject that I've touched on previously to some degree, specifically with patience in manifesting, right? Um, and I talked a little bit about the fact that human beings suffer from a lack of patience quite a bit, right? We pretty much want what we want when we want it as soon as possible, get it to us ASAP, right? Um, but I would say let's understand a little bit about that, right? Let's understand a little bit about our perception of time, even, right? And how we sort of keep track of the cycles in our life that make up our time and time frames, right? So right away we know, and thinking, let's talk about our time and how we calculate time. So we have different measurements of time that we keep track of that are all relative to cycles, right? For example, a year, we say, or I'll start with a smaller measurement. We start with a second, right? 60 seconds constitutes a minute, right? So what we've done is taken the time frame that we reference as a minute, and we have broken that down into 60 parts, and we utilize that. Same thing goes for um, minutes into the next largest frame that we record, which is hours, right? Um, 60 minutes gives you an hour, okay? So then the calculation changes just a little bit with hours to days, right? Of course, 24 hours makes up a day. However, 6 times 4 is 24, right? So then we talk about days into weeks, of course. 7 days constitutes our week. Uh, got the 7 in there. All right, all right. Uh, and from days to weeks, yeah, I said days to weeks. 7 days is a week. 52 weeks roughly makes up a year, right? But better or more accurately calculated as 365 and a quarter days, I believe, makes up a year. All right. So all those other measurements, and then we have different groupings for years, decades, generations, all the way up to millennia, right? 1,000 years. Skipping over 100 years, of course, which is a century. But yeah, all you can see that the focal point there is around our year, right? Either breaking down the year or larger groupings of years, but all around the year, which makes sense because that is the major cycle uh, that makes up our reality, right? It takes our sun, or takes our planet rather, uh, that 365 and a quarter days to get or to complete one revolution around our sun, right? To orbit the sun completely one time, it takes what we calculate as a year. All right. So let's put that in perspective a little bit. We're recognizing a major revolution, right? In our existence, which is the our sun revolving around, or excuse me, our planet revolving around our sun. But I was alluding to Another great revolution, which is the next step of our perception, I would say, in terms of our existence here in this spatial location, right? That we call our galaxy. So we know that our galaxy, excuse me, well, I'll take it back a little bit. Our sun is the center of our solar system, right? There are planets that revolve and, in fact, orbit around the sun. And that forms our solar system. So solar systems actually do the same thing in our galaxy. Solar systems revolve around the center of the galaxy. Some refer to that as the central sun, right? Um, and that revolution is essentially the same as our planet's revolution around our sun, which is, of course, what gives us our calculation of a year. So, what if we were to change our perspective just a bit? And what if we thought about time measurement in terms of that greater revolution, right? The revolution of our solar system around the center of our galaxy. Um, I have heard of some mentionings of that uh, used as a measurement of time, referred to as the big revolution or the big rev, right? Um, Sometimes you can run into this form of calculation with those who deal in the discipline of astrology, right? But yeah, the big rev is what we can, I guess, nickname for the revolution of our galaxy, or rather our solar system around the center of our galaxy, right? So, what I'm proposing is the same way the year would make up the unit or basis of our calculation, um, whether it be parts of a year, like I said, we uh, that we use to measure time, like days, hours, months, etc., or larger segments or groupings, rather, of years, right? Decades, generations, centuries, millennia. Okay, so what if the unit that we use as the basis for that wasn't in fact a year, or the revolution of our planet around our sun, but the next largest revolution that should be profound to us, right, is the revolution of our solar system around this galaxy. So if we did that, then our perception of time would be vastly different, right? Think about that. It would become much greater. What we perceive as a day, or the correspond, I guess, corresponding term to a day, galactically in that way, will be much longer than what we perceive as being a day now. So if a day was not based on the revolution of our planet around our sun, but instead based on the revolution of our solar system around our galaxy, our perception of time would be far greater, and thus brings me finally back around to my point. Patience is based on our perception. As I've stated, virtually all things are. Our perception is so much more powerful than most of us give credit for in our daily thinking, right? So I just gave you a pretty clear way, though I take my own time, as King Sadiq tis do, a pretty clear way of changing your calculation and thus your perception of time. right? Um, and I showed you how a day could be far, far greater than what we perceive a day to be now, right? So, I would also wrap all this up in saying that when we're manifesting or attempting to manifest, or when we are thinking about things of great importance in our paradigm, and or thinking of things that may or may not be affected, well, all things are ultimately affected by the spirit world, by our own manifestation spiritually, right? And of course, all things created by the grand, or rather by the omniversal creator, right? So I'm saying that we're talking about greater than ourselves, um, and greater than our paradigm now. So we have to relinquish ourselves to the thought that time itself can be much greater than the way we perceive it, and thus our perception of patience would have to correspondingly shift, which means our patience would have to be much, much greater. So let's just think about that. Sometimes when we pray for something, or when we're trying to manifest something, that what we think being patient is not necessarily the total story, right? Patience can be looked at, perceived in a far greater scope, right, than what we do on a daily basis. Perhaps this is why we are so impatient, because we tend to sort of shrink everything down to our level, for lack of a better way to state it. I'm saying let's be more expansive, right? Let's be expansive, and let's think about things utilizing patience with a far greater scope. And perhaps looking at things in that manner will increase our patience, right? And give us the ability to wait for things and to observe things along the way. Because certainly it's not about the outcome as much as it is about the process, right? And how we mature spiritually as a result of the process. I've often said to those who know me closest that life is essentially about experiencing, um, learning, growing, and maturing based off of what you've learned and grown from, right? So let us correspondingly expand our experiences, our appreciation of the process of our experiences, and let's again correspondingly increase our patience, and let that give us a little bit more of a master's perspective, right, when it comes to manifesting, praying for something, um, for impressing your will, right, upon the universe. Because certainly the way the universe works, uh, and I've said this before, is almost like a giant, what we call 3D printer, right? But it can be 5D, 4D, 5D. So let's increase our input patiently and expansively. Worldwide movement, King Sadiq, peace, love, respect. All right.